Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, I'm hoping that you are doing well. You are ready for today's program, and hey, we have a great show lined up for you where in the first part of the program is completely dedicated to Public Safety Network. If you haven't heard of them, you can of course check them out at publicsafety.network. That will be their website, but I think the best place to be is to just stay put. And hey, we're going to be talking to the founder of the company all about what they do, how they do it, how it works, and hey, how hopefully this company is going to be able to help people, help first responders help people. There we go. So yeah, this is going to be a very important topic and a very interesting one because I don't think that a lot of people so many people rely on first responders and, firefighters, police, medical services, things like that. But on their end, it hasn't changed in how, whenever 911 was put into place. You dial 911 and you call it a day. That is the end of your interaction. But on the other end of that, man, that is a convoluted and in so many cases an outdated system that they have to work with. And, it's almost kind of like air traffic control. When you see just how dated and how and really how antiquated the technology that they use is, it's amazing that they're able to do such a fantastic job that they do. But hey, I think just like so many fields in our day-to-day lives, it's time for an upgrade. And hey, that's what we're going to talk about here today with Public Safety Network. But before we get started, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including the show notes. You'll find a link to our guest website, any topics that we discuss. When we do computer and technology news, we'll throw up any articles, reviews, links, stuff like that. And yeah, at the website, you'll find other, topics that you may find interesting, and of course find us on social media. So that's my long introduction. Why don't we go ahead and just get started here. So as I said before, joining us is once again the Public Safety Network and the founder of the company, Mr. TJ Kennedy. And why don't we go ahead, bring him on and get this thing started. So TJ, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing?
Great, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really, really well. And, hopefully I wasn't too far off the mark there, really about, what the Public Safety Network really is. But at the same time, I would really like to hear from your own words what your mission statement is. And really, what is your background? Why did you decide to get involved in this kind of field?
I appreciate that, Ben. I mean, real quick, the vision and goals of the Public Safety Network are to empower first responders with life-saving technology. And it's very straightforward in that, to the point you mentioned, 911 has been around for over 50 years. Land mobile radio and some other basic public safety technologies have been in place for more than 50 years. And for the most part, the technical revolution that we've seen over the past 12, 13 years since most of us have moved to using smartphones has left many first responders behind. And what's unique about it is I started my career as a firefighter and a paramedic, and also was a state trooper. And so I was able to operate in both the police, fire, and emergency medical services worlds. And when I did that, I understood, firsthand what worked and did not work with technology. And most of the technology I had available to me did not actually allow me to communicate. A large portion of the counties I covered did not have great radio coverage and did not have great cellular coverage. Obviously, this was back in the 90s and into the early 2000s. A lot has changed. We've built a lot of new technologies since then. But what's most interesting is we really have not been able to take advantage of the cloud in the way that the average consumer has over the past 10 years. And the main reason that was holding agencies back of moving to the cloud was the fact that they didn't have reliable connectivity to broadband, to wireless broadband, and having the ability to have priority or preemption to make sure that they always get through. And that was something we were able to solve at FirstNet. My last role before creating the Public Safety Network was as president of FirstNet, which stands for the First Responder Network Authority. And what's great about FirstNet is it once and for all put the marker down that public safety requires priority preemption encryption in a public safety dedicated network to be able to operate and communicate. This was very successful in the fact that it was implemented in 2017 with a public-private partnership that actually made it occur. And on top of that, it has been implemented by AT&T, who won that public-private partnership with a nationwide public safety broadband network that has already stood up. It has also encouraged other networks in the U.S., as an example, like Verizon and T-Mobile and Sprint and so forth, to also add priority and other services to keep up with the public safety network, which means that literally we have changed the baseline for what kind of communications and networks are available to first responders.
Which, of course, is very, very important. And there are some recent headlines, and by recent, I mean maybe the last couple months, that especially with the fires in California, I'm sure that you know which headline I'm talking about, where these partnerships, in a lot of ways, they save municipalities and cities very, very strict and limited funds that they have to work with. Building out these partnerships really does help them do things that they wouldn't be able to do before. But of course, with these private partnerships, you run into some issues, but by and large, you think that this is the way that the public, first of all, the public safety network that you run, but that first responders and really these critical services, you think this is the best way forward, is to make these partnerships and work with the private sector?
I do believe public-private partnerships are a huge part of the future, not just for public safety, but for local government as well. I do believe that you get a lot more when both sides can win and provide better services at a lower cost. And I think that's something we were able to show with the FirstNet network, is that there was no appropriated tax dollars that went to create the backbone network. It was done through the public-private partnership in leveraging a spectrum, which is a very cost-efficient way to build a nationwide network and to operate it. It also allowed that we could get the economies of scale for public safety that are very difficult in a country like the United States, where we have over 60,000 public safety agencies across police, fire, and EMS at the city, county, special service district, state level, federal level. We're not talking about 1 or 10 agencies. We're talking about literally 18,000 plus police departments. And when you have that, you need to have the economies of scale that everyone can operate with the same type of a network and the same type of technology that is built in an open standard sort of way, so that we can take advantage of it. And I think you're going to see an exciting shift from kind of an old CapEx and OpEx model that was very CapEx heavy, capital expenditures as well as operational expenditures, to a mostly OpEx model, where agencies can get access to networks very inexpensively, and then it can access applications and services on top of those networks that are very cost effective and allow them to take advantage of newer and better technology, rather than spending many years trying to procure something that may be outdated by the time they get their hands on it.
And I know that the two fields are completely separated, but I will say that we've seen this even in the radio business, where back in the day we had to have something called an ISDN line. First of all, we had to go into the studio, and after that, we were able to get an ISDN line for actually our house and build like an in-home studio. And now we can just do everything kind of over broadband, which over 25 years, the evolution has definitely made things a lot more convenient. And I'm glad to see that other fields are going through the same kind of revolution, where, hey, just because things were built in the 90s and that's the way they were, doesn't mean that in 2020 that's the way they have to be. And to kind of hammer that point home, I want you to speak to kind of that grievance that so many people have, especially when it comes to emergency responders or police departments or things like that. I think that people live their day-to-day lives with text messaging. They live their day-to-day lives with, sending pictures, sending photos, GPS data, or I should say geolocation data, and things like that. And then they say, man, why is it that when I text 911 for help, why can't they tell exactly where I am? If they're doing a cell phone versus, let's say, a traditional landline. In your experience, the difference between the individuals and emergency, in these, in these centers for adopting new technology, the main barrier is, is it just actually putting in the labor and doing it? Is it about the fact that you can't take these things offline for a couple weeks to really, figure them out? What do you think is the biggest barrier to change with that you currently see?
Great question. I think the biggest barrier to change is always human interaction. It's not usually the technology. The technology today is capable of doing all the things you just mentioned and does exist. And so it's about changing our operations to support it. I think on a practical level, it's also at the local agency level. It's a change in where we spend our funding and how best to acquire this technology. The good news is with the move to an operational expenditure model, I do believe that it's faster and easier to do than ever before. Mm-hmm. A great example was one of the things you mentioned. There is a company called Rapid SOS that I'm on the advisory board of, and they created the technology that geolocates those 911 callers, and it also can provide rich data from them, video and text and other elements, to 911 public safety answering points. And as an example, they started in less than, let's say, 100 public safety answering points over a year and a half ago, and now they have more than 3,500 of those answering points where they are now in. And so that's a pretty rapid change in less than 18 months. Also, what's exciting about that is there's about 6,000 answering points in the United States. So they've gone from a very low number to more than half in less than 18 months. So this change can occur very, very quickly, and that will give those enhanced capabilities that we're talking about so that you literally can know down to a very small area where that wireless 911 caller is calling from. And it's become very accurate that it has literally gotten people from one side of the street or one floor of a building or one exact location to be able to save someone's life. And it's saving thousands of lives more than we could have saved before, because it's not just about the right location, it's about the speed in which police, fire, and emergency medical services can arrive on scene to enact the help that needs to be required at that particular scene.
Yeah, there's certainly there's certainly a lot that goes into this, and we've seen instances where, in some cases it's not just about the everyday citizen being able to send a picture of a burning building, but it's about even emergency services themselves, firefighters being able to get an exact position on, let's say, a fire that they're fighting. I'm talking like forest fire, and being able to kind of say that, oh, this team is probably about to be surrounded by fire. We got to get them out, blah, blah, blah. Getting that immediate, and you used this word a little bit ago, but reliable. Has reliability when it came to data and reliability when it came to maybe products in the past, has that been an issue? I know that like I said, with ISDN line and radio here, before straight up broadband you had DSL and dial-up connections. Those were unfortunately not reliable enough for constant radio broadcasting. So you had to get this stupid ISDN line system, which had many redundancies, and it was great, and it was very outdated by the time that we were dealing with it. But reliability, how important is that to what it is that you're trying to do?
Reliability is critical, and a good example is if you were to look at your cell phone provider or even different services provider, especially on the wireless side, is they don't typically sign up to a reliability agreement. And so if you look at that, you can't count on 3 nines or 4 nines of reliability, but with the FirstNet network, we can. They have committed to that reliability, and that is huge. It's also about resiliency. There are things that happen every day in the United States from a natural disaster perspective, and whether that's a hurricane or a tornado or things that occur. And sometimes you can't physically harden enough every particular site, but what you can do is you can be hardened, you can be redundant and resilient in your fiber backhaul and your microwave backhaul for the network. And then you also can have what we call deployables, or have the ability for cells on wheels and cells on light trucks and cells on wings, which are now airborne tethered drones, as an example, that can be deployed, including a tethered aerostat that are part of the FirstNet network. And that allows us to ensure that networks can be reconstituted. It allows us that, a good example, the Super Bowl is just coming up this week, that we will have tremendous amounts of additional assets in and around the Super Bowl to ensure that public safety communication can always get through. And with that priority and preemption, they'll always be at the front of the line, and they'll be able to even knock someone out of the front of the line if they have to get that communication through. And that's an important practical nature if you're responding to a shooting, or you're responding to a heart attack, or you're responding to a fire. And it's for two parts. One is to protect the firefighters and the paramedics and the police officers, obviously communicating with each other. Like you just mentioned, the location of a firefighter is so critical. But it's also for responding to citizens and responding in groups of, even 100,000 in a stadium. It is so critical that those responses are seamless. And that will only happen with rich data being shared over a network between police officers, firefighters, and paramedics from different agencies, for that matter.
I gotcha. So this may be taking a little bit of a step back, but you mentioned FirstNet. For everyone out there watching on the video portion, we're going to have it up there. So obviously we're here talking about the public safety network, and then you mentioned FirstNet was, I believe, the first organization that that you were kind of running, and then public safety network was an offshoot of that, I believe. Could you once again reiterate what the relationship between FirstNet is and public safety network?
Sure. So when I was at FirstNet, I was at FirstNet.gov, which is the government agency that created the FirstNet network, and I was president of that. That is now being run by FirstNet.com, which was the website you just had up there, which is being run by AT&T under contract with FirstNet.gov, if you think about it that way, which is an independent authority inside the U.S. government. When I left in early 2018, I created my own company called the Public Safety Network. And our company focuses on providing advisory services to companies that are building life-saving technology for first responders. We only focus on public safety. And so our goal is those companies, both existing legacy companies as well as startup innovative companies, that can really drive technology for actual public safety first responders and leveraging that on LTE and modern networks. And what's critical about that is the market has changed drastically in just the last couple of years, from one that was mostly focused on land mobile radio and 911 services, like you mentioned at the beginning of this discussion. And now it's moving very much into a rich data world that leverages LTE networks and really leverages next generation 911 data that will be coming into those public safety answering points. And so this means a big change for the legacy companies in the public safety space. It's much more focused on wireless broadband and on that mission critical level of wireless broadband for mission critical push to talk, mission critical push to video, mission critical data that's going to be shared between our first responders in the field. So that's what our company does. We work with both those legacy companies and those startups, and we have a number of startups that we're accelerating with great technology to really save lives.
I gotcha. And also, just as an aside, I see here, of course, the United States FirstNet, as you mentioned, UK Emergency Services Network, and the South Korea SafeNet. And I'm sure that there are more besides, even outside that little cut. Being international like that, do you think that startups or even, kind of the existing infrastructure, is there a big disparity between, let's say South Korea, which as many people might know, is very, very technologically savvy? Like, they're a much smaller nation. They put a lot more money into new technology, and they have some of the fastest internet speeds, for instance. Their network availability for their citizens is like 99.99%. They invest heavily into technology, and then, contrast that with America, where you just have so much area. There are people who live miles from anyone else. The ability to get these networks into place is its own challenge altogether. Do you see a lot of difference between, really worldwide, really advancing their public safety networks, be it in South Korea, America, the UK, so on and so forth?
No, you bring up a great question, and I did a little research on this, not even knowing that you were going to ask this question, but I've used it over the past couple of years with comparisons. And the geography of the United States is very challenging, especially west of the Mississippi. And I've spent a lot of my time in the Rocky Mountain region and Utah and Colorado, and certainly we have some major issues with having coverage because of that. But if you look at Korea and we look at what's been done over there, Korea is about the size of the state of Indiana. If we look at the United Kingdom, it's the geographical size of the state of Oregon. And so when we talk about covering those in a nationwide manner, it's a different ballgame. And so the United Kingdom, for example, before they started building out the UK ESN network, the Emergency Services Network, they had about 89% of their geography covered with LTE. And so they only had 11% delta. In the U.S., we're multiple times that number of area that's not covered. Now, a lot of that is, federal lands and BLM lands and national parks and things of that nature that are quite large but not very well populated. One of the unique things is, even with all that said, the FirstNet network was started later than the South Korea SafeNet or the UK ESN, but it actually was deployed sooner. So up and running years before nationwide networks, those others were even done. And when you look at the size, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
They did have for the South Korean Olympics a network up in the province surrounding that. That was, a spectacular network, very well built to meet the same kind of needs like FirstNet, but now it's being deployed across the rest of the country. UK ESN's continuing to finish out their network and their operational elements, but they will be very much, similar to FirstNet when they're complete. But I think one of the things we did, because it was a public-private partnership model, is we were able to have a network live much sooner, years sooner than people would have expected. And we've been able to deploy very quickly by getting the synergies of deploying in the commercial sector with other technologies. And so, quite proud of where that is today. And to your point, there are many other countries that are driving down this path, such as New Zealand and Australia and Canada and lots of countries in Europe. Finland's close behind. Many of these, have a very important telecom history that from Nokia in Finland, for instance, or others that are driving this. And so we're going to see the whole world is going to move to public safety LTE as the core public safety grade operable network that helps first responders communicate and share data in a mission critical sort of way every day. And I'm excited to see that happen, because it's something I've worked many years in my life for. And I think it's overdue.
Yeah.
I think that when we were able to put smartphones in the hands of citizens in 2007 and 2008 and 2009, it became very ubiquitous. It doesn't matter on which platform you're operating on. Public safety was somewhat left behind because they didn't have that reliability, and they didn't have those public safety grade features like priority and preemption and encryption that are now available to them. And that's changed the playing field, because what it does for public safety is it ensures us that reliability and ensures us the ability to access the cloud for public safety services, which just changes the way then that next generation 911 can share those locations and video and data from, let's say, a patient with a medic alert device that is wireless, or can connect wirelessly to their smartphone and send that data live to the incoming ambulance. That is a game changer for somebody with a medical condition that can be shared much sooner than the ambulance arrives. Or think of telemedicine in the back of an ambulance with two-way video to an emergency room or to a cardiology unit for a heart attack patient that's going to be going into the cath lab, or for a stroke patient that is going to a stroke center and having the ability for data to be sent ahead of time. This can really make the difference between life and death. And so these are such important elements. And as we look at how much healthcare is a part of everyone in the world, but especially here in the US, healthcare is on the top of mind for all of us. What if we could do more in the field? What if we could do more in remote areas? What if we could do more to make sure people go to the appropriate facility or get the appropriate care quicker from an EMS service? It's going to change lives, and it's so critical that we focus on.
One of the medicine and medical is such a huge topic in technology that one instance that we really like to share on the show is this idea. You mentioned drones earlier, but the drones are there to provide kind of access to communications. There's another instance of at least a drone being used in conversation, or that they're in talks to use it this way, where an ambulance who may be en route and then hits traffic, stuck in a traffic jam, whatever, they're able to send out a drone directly to someone who's having heart problems, and the drone will have the paddles. I'm sure everyone's seen them on TV, and the drone, and I'm sure that you know the name of it.
There are defibrillator drones that are now available, and there are some that actually transport a automated external defibrillator to the scene. We actually have a live instance of that being done in the Reno, Nevada area today.
Very cool.
There are drones that were created in Europe that actually have a built-in defibrillator plus two-way video, so that a paramedic can talk somebody through using the drone, that AED, the automatic external defibrillator that's built into it. And then we also have drones that are tethered to fire engines or ambulances that provide on-scene video and situational awareness that are quite critical. So these are huge advances, and they rely on having communication across LTE and other networks as well.
So, and this is actually good. Actually, the first, kind of the questions that we have here for you. We've been bouncing around everywhere, but it's been a great conversation so far, so I'm not worried about it. But that was the first question, which is the future of how technology will help save lives. And really, is it just, once you provide that platform, once you provide that ability that anyone can have two-way video, a constant stream of data, you can have drones and like anything that I guess the consumers are currently, kind of working with, or even industries are currently working with as far as technology goes. As soon as you provide that platform to first responders, is that really the future of technology? And it's just a matter of, it's what we're using today, such as smartphones in first responders' hands. It's just using them effectively for the situation at hand.
Yes, I think it's important that we think about this kind of on two sides. On the left side, if I'm a visual person, if you're the citizen and you're calling 911, you have these very powerful wireless electronic devices that can send a lot of important data to what is considered next generation 911 services that can process that and go through the public safety answering point with rich data of both your location and what's going on and potentially video and other data. What we have to have then is public safety answering points that are modernized to be able to accept that data and leverage it. And third, to be able to forward that on across networks like FirstNet to police officers, firefighters, paramedics in the field that can leverage that data in a smart way. Now that we have public safety networks with mission critical capabilities in the field for first responders in the US and soon around the rest of the world, they now have the ability to do amazing things with that data, like some of the examples we've just walked through. So we have to both improve the next generation 911 side of it for ingesting that data. We can now send it from any smartphone, both iOS or Android works just fine. We now have to upgrade all those public safety answering points to be able to process it. And we also have to change the way that a dispatch center works. Traditionally, it used to be a call taker taking a 911 call and a radio dispatcher speaking on the radio. It's not going to work like that in the future. It is going to be rich data coming in from citizens and that rich data being processed. And in some cases, leveraged with AI and other elements to get the right data to the right responders in the right place at the right time. Those responders will now have access to, if you think of the average ambulance that might be driven by an emergency medical technician and might have a paramedic that's also riding in that ambulance in the right seat, that paramedic now has the ability to look at the available data, which could be video or photos from a car accident scene. It could be data that comes from OnStar about the crash and how fast the car was going and what airbags have been deployed and what seatbelts have been activated, really rich data about that car accident, as well as telling them where the nearest hospitals are, where the nearest air ambulance or helicopter might be, if we needed to have them respond to that scene, how many patients are there. This is data that is hard to get over the radio and through that telephone game of both a phone call and radio that now can be sent in real time in a matter of seconds with very rich data that's easy to digest. And with that, now that they're at that scene, they now have the ability to leverage that technology on the scene to have voice-to-text communications, to be able to fill out electronic medical records. They have the ability to do two-way telemedicine if needed. They have the ability to send vital signs that are coming off of monitors and sensors through wireless technology to both the reports and to the hospitals that will be receiving those patients. And so you can see where there's an important continuum of technology that goes all the way from the citizen to the call center to the responders, in between the different responders, police, fire, and EMS, and to the receiving hospitals or the follow-up units, wherever that is required. And this could be on the police side going to detectives. This could be on the fire side, on a wildfire, on a structure fire. All of them have great examples where this technology can really improve the way that first responders respond. And that's what's so life-saving. And it's about making their job safer, making the ability to do their job more effective, and in some cases, even making it more efficient. We can do less with more if we have the right information in the hands of the right folks when they need it.
So this is one area that when we have, really private industry and corporations, this movement of bring your own device, and we're going to completely set aside this idea of, not really about privacy, but more about data security. And we can talk about that a little bit later if you like, but I want to really focus on why companies really appreciate bring your own device is because the amount of training time that goes into either a new hire or, switching up platforms, things like that, is drastically reduced when people are using their own phone. They don't have to, learn how to use a different device, and, they have their own idiosyncrasies and so on and so forth. bring your own device has a lot of benefits to cost saving, like you said, making things more efficient, because if people are already going to be on their phones, then hey, they might as well do their job on their phones as well. There's a lot of benefits to using smartphones today in a situation like you're talking about, not just for citizens, but then for the first responders. Do first responders use smartphones like we do, or do they get state issued weird phones? And then on top of that, do they get apps? There's an app for everything, and a good app can make everything from communication to to any kind of business responsibility. It can make it so much easier. So that's my question. Do first responders use smartphones, and are there apps tailored specifically for the jobs that we're talking about that need to be done?
Two very good questions, and I have some detailed answers. So
Sure.
First off, every first responder that we've surveyed out there in the United States uses a smartphone at work. A large percentage of them are BYOD, around 70% right now, and around 30% are department issued. I do see the department issued going up, mostly because it in many ways can help them with cybersecurity issues. At the same point, there are solutions like securecommunications.com that can secure all of your over-the-top applications to communicate with the cloud and each other in a secure, encrypted fashion, even if you're on a BYOD device. So there's pros and cons to both, but you can definitely make it secure in either fashion. But the point that you've asked, most importantly, is do a lot of them bring their own tablets, their own smartphones? The answer is yes. But I also see every single day agencies are getting into more and more of issuing equipment, not like what you mentioned in the past, which was a lot of old, outdated equipment that wasn't necessarily as modern as some of the more recent technology. It's now a matter of giving them the right new wireless technology on a regular basis every year or two to make a big difference, rather than having stuff that is either so locked down that it's not useful, or it's so outdated. And so I do think it's really important to look at the kinds of solutions like secure communications that can allow folks to have encrypted communications and public safety while still using BYOD devices. I think it's also important that we look at the power of enterprise solutions aren't bad either. And so a good example would be, there are public safety smartphones out there from Sonom and from Samsung. And on the Samsung example, if there's some large departments that have gone to using their new hardened device, which has a first responder down button, which is built into the mission critical communications, that allows you to know when an officer needs help or a firefighter needs help. It also has the push to talk buttons on the side of the phone that your average smartphone doesn't have, so that you can use the push to talk features that are like a radio, but it goes across the LTE network. So there are benefits for that. There's benefits where everybody has the same device, so that if you had to use somebody else's device in an emergency, you still could. Obviously, this relies on appropriate cyber and other things to make that work. But you also get, enterprise features such as leveraging Knox or other security platforms that are more enterprise, like we see in the Samsung devices, which are important. And so, it's allowing you to have whitelist and blacklists for applications. Like you said, there are many applications that will make a big difference for public safety, but there are probably some that could be a distraction.
Yeah.
Many agencies that issue their own devices, have more of a whitelist, blacklist policy to make sure that the solutions on that device are approved and that they add to their everyday job.
So my next question is something that's very specific to wireless phones and emergency services. We have heard this this warning for I remember hearing it back in high school myself, which hard to believe it's. Yeah, about 11 years ago. So I will say that this has been going on ever since you said, things like cell phones have really made it into people's hands. That traditionally, you call 911 from a house landline, they can pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. You're good to go. In a lot of cases, if a cell phone tries to call 911, they, the information that gets routed to the, to the first responders is generally, I think, and you can correct me on this, the information that is registered to the phone. So if my phone is registered to my home address, but I'm very much not at my home, it will still send the wrong information in the wrong area as to where I am. Has that been solved, and where are we at with that whole fiasco? If someone today listening to the show calls 911 on their cell phone, do they have to tell? I mean, they should tell exactly where they are, but will they get that automatically, or is it up to the individual to tell them where they are?
It's a great question, and it's been a long-standing problem. A little bit of history on the anti-alley, or the automatic numbering information, automatic location information, which went with landlines, is when you called from 212 Maple Avenue on a landline, it would tell you you're at 212 Maple Avenue and would show on a map where that's at, and it would give your phone number. It would be 555-1212, right? And they would give that phone number. The reality is less than 20% of emergency calls come from landlines today. More than 80% across the country come from wireless devices. And more are going to be coming from even wireless IoT devices, not just cellular devices like we think of as the first element of it. With that, the company that I mentioned earlier today, RapidSOS.com, they have created the solution that is used by both Google on the Android side and Apple on the iOS side, that allows them to be able to provide accurate location on where you're located to 911 centers. And more than half of the 911 centers in America are now utilizing that enhanced capability. There are also enhanced capabilities in the call handling providers, the major providers in the US, to be able to provide that more accurate location from wireless callers, because it is so common, and that's a critical part of what you're seeing from companies like Intrado and others that do call handling, and that's really important. One of the things that is not ubiquitous is that every single 911 PSAP has adopted that yet. And that means, to your question, will somebody still ask for your location? The answer is yes. Even if they have your location, they're going to ask because they want to confirm. And even if they're looking at it and they're looking at a dot view on the map, and they know you're at 212 Maple Avenue, they may still ask you, and you say, yes, I'm at 212 Maple Avenue. Obviously, that confirmation is very important to know that they're sending it to the right location. The next piece, though, is there are some wireless centers today that will not, or some public safety answering points today that will not have that wireless accurate location data, and they may have to pinpoint that from you. Many of them may only get, cell tower information or approximate location, which is the older way of doing that, to the point that you were told many years ago. There are still some centers that are only at that level, although most are upgrading at this point.
I gotcha. And, I was just looking through some other questions, and I just realized that as a whole, we have not talked at all about something that, we were just out at CES this year, and, a lot of great technology shown off there. And really, it seemed like the biggest buzzword, and I have my own hang-ups about this whole thing, but the biggest buzzword was 5G and the ability for people, for consumers to, they had like a 5G connected notebook, they had 5G capable phones and tablets and computers and so on and so forth. You haven't mentioned anything about 5G, so far, and in the material that you provided. For the public safety network, as you mentioned, you have, you accelerate startups, you help you advise startups on where the industry is going and things like that. I'm sure that you have to have some kind of opinion and or some kind of insight into 5G and the role it's going to play in the future.
I do, and I was out at CES as well, and certainly 5G was all the buzz, and some of our startups were actually presenting at CES this year, including Malario, which is one of our smart ambulance startups. And it's important, but we also can't lose the forest through the trees. And so 5G is an additional capability on top of 4G. 5G is not a standalone network technology where tomorrow we're going to see 5G turned on and everything else is turned off. Mm-hmm. And I think this is very hard for the average consumer to understand when they see 5G start to appear in the upper right-hand side of their smartphone. Hey, I've got 5G, and then all of a sudden I've got 4G LTE, or even 3G in some networks, potentially, depending on where they happen to be. 4G LTE is basically built on LTE or advanced LTE capabilities, across the US today and across most of the world. 5G is going to be very low latency capabilities that are driven by the deployment on particular spectrum. And the way it's being deployed in the US is very different by different carriers, such as lower band spectrum, more commonly, let's say, with the T-Mobile model to start with, while you're going to see higher band spectrum or mid-band spectrum for AT&T, FirstNet, and Verizon. And what that means is the speeds and capabilities and the latency you see from those networks is going to be different, because the spectrum does matter on what can go through walls and what can go longer distances. But in general, to get the full speed and benefits of that low latency and super high speed, when we're talking about gigabyte and up speed, we're talking about having 5G cell sites that are on high spectrum in very dense areas at very close range. And so this could be every block in a particular city, as an example, where there's going to have to be small cell deployment that goes onto light poles or buildings or things of that nature. So we're not going to be talking much about 5G in deep rural areas for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can do it on lower spectrum, but it also means you're going to have much, much lower speeds. So when people talk about the 5G advantage, that 5G advantage is going to go much more into the metro areas where that very close deployment. Just a block from my office here, I saw a new 5G site go up about a month ago. And, 2 flat panels on a light pole that they built a new light pole for the city that we didn't need, but we did need some 5G there. So we now have extra light, and we happen to have 5G deployed that works right here in my office from that light pole. But, that's within a couple hundred feet of this building. And so that's how it's going to be deployed. And it's an overlay to the 4G LTE network that my wireless services run on right now. And it's going to give me 5G capability when I'm near those very dense towers that are going to provide that much faster and lower latency network. When we hear about it, there are places where it can make a big difference. You hear often on the medical side that we could send, very large CT scans, and we could potentially have telemedicine that's very real time. And that's all true. But ironically, with really good 4G LTE services, we could do just about everything that we want to do in the back of an ambulance with a hospital on 4G LTE. And to your point, we need to have a lot more 4G LTE deployment, and that's important to see continuing to happen. And the major carriers, you're seeing them continue to deploy more and more 4G LTE while we're doing 5G in those denser areas where that lower latency or higher speeds can be achieved with higher spectrum.
Perfect. You answered that perfectly. And I got to say that, that's the issue that I had, was that so many people really consider that 5G is like, it's the next right thing. And so many carriers, from like a marketing standpoint, say that, you're going to get it by the end of 2020. My big deal is that, like you said, in many cases, you're going to need like 4 or 5 times the density of antennas in a city to really get the same amount of coverage that you would with 4G or even 4G LTE. So you can imagine that in a lot of cases, this may take 4 to 5 times as long as the implementation of 4G did back in the day, which, was over a couple of years. 5G is a great, promising technology. Like, this is my byline that I do. 5G is a very promising standard, and the throughput is going to be amazing when you finally get it. Although I just don't see that happening for another couple of years. So I'm happy that, like you said, you're focusing on all technologies, not just what's the new buzzword and what's crazy and what's new. So with that being said, let's talk about.
On that, I think is important. I think it's important that we focus on the nice work being done by most operators today to ensure everything's being built on 3GPP international standards, which include how does 4G LTE and how does 5G get deployed and how does it interoperate with each other. We're also seeing, and just so you know, in the 3GPP standards that are international and most operators around the world are very closely following, there's also a number of public safety features such as the prioritization, the encryption, the preemption capabilities that are in release 13, 14, 15 of 3GPP standards. And these are really important that folks follow because it gives us a worldwide approach to how these public safety features that I care about are going to be built into these networks and give us the same kind of ubiquitous capability in every part of the United States, but hopefully in every part of the world where everybody does that together. So if we have mission critical push to talk applications in Canada and we have them in the US, and we have folks that want to communicate in a northern state, whether that's Minnesota or that's Washington or that's Vermont, that they can communicate with their Canadian counterparts, which you probably don't realize, but every single day ambulances cross our border going to hospitals in the US and in other directions because that's the nearest hospital, even from Vermont going into Canada, for instance, or things of that nature. And so we have to have these ubiquitous communications across country borders even that are driven by important collaboration on how we leverage these cellular networks.
I actually did not know that. So great point to add, and you're absolutely right. It's not just about what is possible here, but what's possible across nation borders, just like you said. So with that being said, let's see, and we have something here about really the whatever as a service model. So many people know this. Think of kind of like the Netflix, where they'll provide you unlimited movies. They'll update it, they'll take stuff away. which is their prerogative. But essentially, you pay for the service of watching Netflix. There are many others out there that, really most industries seem to be selling you as a service, be it grocery delivery, be it riding in cars, be it so many different things. It's no longer that you buy a piece of software and you're done. No, it's you buy the service, you get the software and the support, but you pay a continuous monthly fee, kind of a recurring revenue kind of stream. And businesses seem to really appreciate that because it's not just like a one-off $100 in your pocket. It's a continuous, $10 in your pocket every single month. And over time, the business, the economics of it work out. And also for the consumer, they're not hit with that one-time fee. And also the thing that they buy never goes out of date. They never have to really upgrade. As long as they continue to subscribe to the service, they get the latest updates and all that kind of thing. Like really, it's a really good model for general consumers, for businesses. It's really taken off. Everything that we've talked about here today as a service, are you seeing that kind of business model working its way even into first responders?
We finally are. And it's an exciting time because, to your point, there are benefits to the agencies and to the first responders of being able to access new and more modern technologies at a much lower cost thanks to platforms as a service, whether that's software as a service, hardware as a service, the entire platform as a service. And we're seeing it really start to take hold. Last year, I think this year it will double or quadruple in the size that we'll see. There's some pretty interesting and fun examples. Our smart ambulance startup, Alario.com, they're selling it purely as a service. So no longer do you have to spend thousands of dollars on hardware for every ambulance crew, but now you can actually just buy it as a service and you have hardware and connectivity in the entire platform as a service, including the cloud services. There are companies like Pulsera that are doing that on purely the communication side as a platform between hospitals and other hospitals, as well as EMS, platform as a service. You see it on the law enforcement side with evidence.com, which is run by Axon. You can now have all of your body-worn video and all of those elements kept in the cloud for you, and it's a monthly as a service cost rather than a very large CapEx and operating expense together. And this allows that you're always getting that new technology, like you mentioned. We no longer say that, hey, our radios or our equipment are end of life after 10 years. It's a matter that just like we do, every year or two, you're going to have upgraded equipment. And if you build that into your as a service model, you don't have to go back to a city council and ask for new budget. It's going to come because you plan that in as an operating expense. I would really hope that police chiefs, fire chiefs, EMS chiefs, mayors, county commissioners, and others really look at, understanding the full cost to outfit a police officer or a firefighter or a paramedic and their crews. And we do this today when we think of insurance for public safety. We do this when we think of personal protective equipment, think of firefighter turnout gear or law enforcement uniforms and safety equipment, a police car, fuel for that car. We understand how much that costs up front and how much that costs each month and how do we amortize that. But we would really like to get it down to not only those elements, but also the technology and the applications and the platforms that they have to access are adding another $5, $10, $100 per month to that particular service, rather than being in the business of deploying $100 million of back-end technology in a city data center, when really, we should be leveraging the cloud and no longer having local data centers. And we should have more than enough reliability in multiple networks that ensure we can always access that cloud, even when the power goes out or even when one of those networks goes down.
No, and you said that very well. And this next question, we're running a little tight on time. I kind of had a feeling this interview was going to be almost the entire hour of the show. So let's get jump to some topics. This next one I think has to do with your accelerator services and really you're working with these startups that have great ideas, but I guess it's your job to say, well, here's how you can change it a little bit to make it a lot better, or you can just say, wow, that's never going to work. That's just not the way the world works. It sounds like you either have to be the good guy, the bad guy, the mentor, or somewhere in between. Talk about what innovation do you hope to see get even more traction in terms of public safety in 2020? Because I'm sure that you see new technology coming in from every angle. Which angle are you excited about this year?
I'm super excited about more platforms as a service that are driving immediate needs for police officers, firefighters, and paramedics. I think that we will see improvement in what is known as X, Y, and Z axis location. Z axis being what floor are you on in a building? Think of trying to find a firefighter who's down, and down to even the exact department or office number that somebody is in for location. So indoor location and elevation should be getting much more accurate this year, and I think that's an incredible leap forward for public safety. I think we're going to see it also on the unmanned aerial systems side, that we're going to see much more tethered and untethered drone activity for police, fire, and EMS is being adopted very, very quickly. And then most importantly, I think, is this improved communications and leveraging rich data for both our public safety answering points and the way that we respond to calls. I really believe in something that's a concept called mobile first. And as we outfit first responders, I think those startups and innovators, even legacy companies who want to innovate, are going to change their mindset to always making sure we outfit first responders in a mobile first concept. I think that first responders are about the most mobile workforce in the world. Mm-hmm. I think that the majority of what they do, they can't do unless they can respond to a scene and operate out in the elements and save lives in people's homes and people's businesses, on the side of highways, on the side of mountains. And then they have to transport those people either to a hospital or to a jail or to other elements. And so they're super, super mobile, and they're in all kinds of environments. So these platforms and these solutions have to be built with mobile first, office last, right? So if you think about it, I don't think anybody should ever buy another desktop computer for a fire station or a desktop computer for a police station. We don't even necessarily have to have a lot of police stations anymore. We need to put people out in the field. Fire stations are obviously very critical for decontamination and rest and all the things that go along with maintaining fire engines and equipment. But I think that we need to outfit officers with the best mobile device, the best wearable devices, the best tablets, the best AI and AR that will help them do their job, the best back-end cloud systems that will help them store their police records or be able to access maps for a firefighter or a paramedic to get to the scene better, or to look at hazardous materials databases. We need to do this with outfitting the mobile responder first. The back-end stuff, there's no reason why a tablet won't work in a fire station or a police station just like it will in the field. But we shouldn't in 2020 be buying things that have to be plugged into the wall at a station as much as we should be outfitting them with the appropriate mobile equipment that works in the field and in a station and allows them to be 100% mobile all the time.
That is definitely a challenge. It seems that a challenge that you and really the Public Safety Network seem really enthusiastic to tackle. I will say that that's one topic that we didn't talk about, which we actually have like a minute or two if you wanted to mention. But wearables is some of the things that you mentioned, really pinpointing people within a building, for instance. That's a place where wearables would really come in handy, because let's say if you have a police officer who is unfortunately down, you would know the vitals, you would know their location, you would know, what happened just before they went down, things like that. Wearables, as far as first responders go, is this about, in private sector, we're seeing it's like, we want our employees to be healthy. We want them to walk 10,000 steps. That's not exactly the angle I think wearables, when it comes to first responders, is going to be. How do you see wearables working into the system?
Certainly, we love the health and safety features of wearables for all police officers, firefighters, and paramedics, because they have high exertion, they're very physical in their role every day, and we certainly want them to be safe, and we want them to track that same data like we do. But in addition, we want to use those sensors, for instance, to know if a firefighter has fallen down and they can't get back up in a burning building. That is a much more life-threatening scenario than we would have with the average consumer, getting their 10,000 steps in. We also want to see the increases in temperature, the increases in heart rate, or other vital signs that are going to give us a sign that somebody might be in trouble. And that may happen before they stop moving inside of a building, for instance, but we see their heart rate go up by 50%. These should trigger alerts to incident commanders to get that firefighter out and to send in a RIC team, a rescue team, to go and get them out and bring them to safety. These are critical things that we see improving, and we're seeing both improvements that are being built on top of off-the-shelf equipment from folks like Samsung or Apple or others, and we're seeing things built on custom wearables that are platforms as a service for firefighters to ensure their indoor location and safety is there, and both of which are just really critical as we move forward. And I think that when we think of the Internet of Life-Saving Things, or IOLST, for public safety, I think all of these elements are really lifesavers for police, fire, and emergency medical services. And we need to focus on building the platforms that become the Internet of life-saving things to our first responders.
And of course, something that you kind of touched on there was really more. We've heard this more and more in the healthcare sector, which is monitoring by exception, because you could have, of course, the traditional route. Let's say in maybe an assisted living facility, you have a team of 15 nurses who would monitor 150 patients. Whereas with technology and with wearables and with monitoring by exception, you could have one person sitting at a computer and just seeing that 150 people are okay. Maybe one or two are awake. They're calling for help or whatever, and you could do the job of 15 people. You can now do with maybe 3 or 4. And I guess that's with first responders. Is if you have a workforce of 100 different police officers, if you had if in a chaotic situation you could monitor by exception, you could really focus in on the 5-10 that need help and let the rest do their jobs. That'd be very, very helpful. And hey, clear the way. You have a tough head, and of course, everyone, we have been talking to the founder of the Public Safety Network, TJ Kennedy. And TJ, you have a very tough job ahead of you, really advising this field. This is not easy. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different organizations. But like I said before, you seem very passionate about this. You see a lot of movement here in the next couple of years?
I do. I see the movement actually accelerating. Last year we saw an acceleration. This year we expect it to accelerate even more. Now that folks can rely on public safety LTE networks, we know that we can have life-saving applications and hardware and platforms that will ride on top of that will make a huge life-saving difference to both first responders and the citizens they serve.
Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and throw up a link to the website, and the other 2 websites that you also kind of pointed out. We'll throw those in the article as well. But TJ, I want you to have the last word. Anything that we didn't touch on? Anything that we didn't mention that you think we should?
I think the last thing is just for everybody out there focused on technology, always think about how your technology can make a difference for those that are saving lives every day, and think about how it could be applied for law enforcement, for fire departments, and for emergency medical services. And don't forget that there are some pretty critical life-saving elements that will make a huge difference if you apply your technology to those fields.
Yeah, hey, using your technology the best you can. Computer America can definitely get behind that. And so everyone, once again, TJ Kennedy, founder, the Public Safety Network. And TJ, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a fantastic interview, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it so much.
All right, and have a good one. We'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye. All right, everyone, and now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move into, we have like 2 minutes left. We're going to try to squeeze in just a singular computer and technology news segment. So with that being said, everyone, here we go. Computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. So, everyone, our first and probably only story. I have, probably about 15. Might actually make another show on the other side of this, but it's okay. So, I think our only story that we're going to cover is actually this one. This one's pretty cool. Speaking of first responders, and this is more the armed forces, but hey, here you go. This is the best I got. U.S. Space Force logo unveiled with a clear Star Trek influence. Now, of course, there's a lot to go in here when it comes to politics and, of course, this new military branch, which is actually going to be a sub-branch under the Air Force. So, yeah, this is actually going to be a sub-branch under the Air Force, but hey, kids of today, you can look forward to potentially joining the Space Force. And they said that the president has been pushing to create a new military branch, dubbed Space Force, since 2018. And of course, they tweeted out a logo for the department, with the most noticeable part of the logo is right in the center, where a design that closely resembles Star Trek's Arrowhead-style Starfleet insignia sits. So yeah, if you recall, Star Trek, of course, and the communicators that they had on their chest, that they would just tap, beep in, the intercom system. Well, hey, it looks almost exactly like that, except of course there's a little comet that runs around it, and of course it's the United States Space Force around it. A picture of the globe, North Star. I'm trying to describe it for everyone out there listening to simply the radio. The Star Trek logo, and then underneath that MMXIX, which of course would be 2019. That would be for. That would be, of course, for the creation of the Space Force, which was signed into law just last year. And they said that the resemblance is less than surprising once you see the logo of the Air Force Space Command, which is the branch that is being rebranded as Space Force. It has also featured the arrowhead and just continues the trend, no matter how shocking it may be, and how much it will cost to establish the new Department of the Air Force. And like I said, this is one of those things that politics can very, very easily come into it. But I would say from a technology standpoint, we are quickly reaching a point where it's not just random satellites. We actually have to really start to strategically think about space and what it means for us and what it means as a nation. And hey, you don't have to agree with a lot to agree that something is definitely in need of some change. Wow, and I actually wasn't showing it the entire time. Here's the logo, everyone. Right here. Here's the logo, if you're watching the video portion. There it is. But the music in the background means that we are simply done. Everyone, I want to thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. And hey, until next time, we had a great interview. We had a great show. And once again, thank you to the Public Safety Network for joining us and talking all about first responders and the like. It's been a lot of fun. And hey, we hope you enjoyed Computer America. Find us on social media, computeramerica.com, always the easiest place. And folks, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.